encumbering.
Yeah, and thanks, Emily, for providing that overview. I think, you know, from ECCLA's perspective, one thing that was really wonderful is that OEC did reach out to ECCLA to help with this process. And so what we came up with and still working on coming up with is a really simple application report that you can run whenever you get new applications, and then request those related quality improvement funds and coaching resources needed to support that specific site. So I think that, like, one major question that I think probably many people have is, you know, how does this relate to the Race to the Top program operating budget that we already have approved in our contracts? And that money doesn't include any quality improvement or coaching funds unless you expressly budgeted for additional quality improvement or coaching funds within that budget. So this new encumbrance is allowing us to kind of separately budget for and manage the direct quality improvement and coaching resources separately from all the other money that it takes to run the Race to the Top program, to complete outreach, to complete QI Navigator support and things like that, and trainings and things like that. Does that sort of help provide an overview?
Sharon, I have a clarity question that you said that unless you have some coaching funds in RTT operating. So if we've got coaching funds in RTT operating, those might be impacted?
Those would be in addition to this additional general accounting encumbrance. But I think one could argue that you may not need to have coaching within your program operating budget because it will be taken care of through the general accounting encumbrance. So I think one other major point of clarification is that unlike the other quality improvement grants, there really for Race to the Top, there is an intention to not have kind of automatically up to 20% of the assigned funds as discretionary. So it's very different type of funding than, you know, school readiness or CCAP or infant toddler. And so the reason is that the state actually wanted to give us more flexibility by increasing the program operating allocation. You know, we did receive an increase overall in our program operating budgets over last year to support those additional outreach efforts or technical assistance needs or training support needs for level 1 sites and others. So it's just structured differently than our other QI grants. So if you have a need to be providing coaching support to level 1 sites, then that would be in your program operating budget, as opposed to in your direct quality improvement or coaching budget through the application process.
So Sharon, I think one thing that you were talking about the increase in operating funds this year for Race to the Top. We heard last year that having that 20% discretionary, you know, carved out of that QI was kind of confusing, right? So some folks put that into the operating and did the outreach. Some folks needed it to be for additional sites that, you know, yes, they're allocated the coaching minimum, but maybe they needed more coaching. And so what my understanding is what happened was that 20% was just built into the Race to the Top budget this year. So really thinking about, okay, where is the most need in our community or with our providers? Is it, you know, are we trying to get folks engaged, and that's that outreach to level 1? Is it really helping some of those level 2 sites, you know, that might need some additional coaching, get that coaching? So I think thinking about from that piece, that was the logic behind just automatically including that 20% discretionary into the current Race to the Top budget. So it's really meant to complement and give you guys, like Sharon said, more flexibility to get people engaged, and then once engaged, progress through the ratings.
This is definitely the first I have heard of this this piece of it being included in our operating budget, so I appreciate that.
What I could do is I looked at some of the materials that were sent out in that Google Drive, and it shows you in that there's a spreadsheet that figures out like how it was a calculation of a certain amount of dollars per licensed provider in your council region. So that's how the increase was calculated, and I would be happy to send that to you guys so you can see the logic of where, how much per site additionally you received in that operating budget, if that's helpful, Lisa.
I think it wouldn't hurt.
So.
Yeah, and Emily, that's the spreadsheet we used during the budgeting process for the fiscal year 16-17. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
yep.
It's a much simpler version of the Race to the Top spreadsheet from last year. So
right.
Hold on. So let me, I will email it to you, Rick, if you want to share with the group again the link to the Google Drive document. So.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Sandy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. Of course, we were estimating the providers that we believe will spend down the money by October 31st. So my question to you is if we have some providers that we did not add to that list that end up, hitting level 2 and wanting to, request funding, do they have to wait now until November 1st?
So my understanding, Sandy, this is Emily, is that our finance team, we got those estimates from you guys. We're sending them downstairs to our finance team, and they're going to build in a bit of a cushion for just that situation. So it depends on how quickly you spend down the estimated amount.
Okay. I was just curious.
You might have to wait list. I mean, depending on how, like, let's say all of a sudden you have really excited home providers. They're like, okay, we're doing this, and we're all doing it right now on October 1st. They might need to be waitlisted. I think, in a way, October 31st seems far away, but it's really less than 2 months. So.
Right. And your goal, Emily, is when you're asking us to estimate, you're asking us to estimate for the funds that will be spent down, not just the funds that we're going to want for that provider. You want to make sure that it's funds that will potentially be spent down by October 31st, right?
Yeah, so exactly. So if you know, for example, that one of your providers is going to take some, they're going to enroll at a community in a class in January, then you wouldn't necessarily need to include them in the estimate for your spend down by October, right? Because then you can do that. We can figure out with the GAE how you can encumber that. And so then I think it's really figuring that piece out.
And then how much notice will, how much time will we have when we need to determine the next quarter providers? I mean, will OEC want us to give them that list by mid-October for starting November 1st, or how much time will we have to send that to you? Because I do have several of them that are going to be, working towards the goal in October, and I want to make sure that I would have enough time to get that information to you.
Sure. So that's part of the process of requesting the funds. So how it works is whatever is built into your budget that you requested through October, you'd spend those first, and then you would encumber GAE funds. And so part of the request is helping us figure out where are you in that spend down of those QI funds, and then when does it start tapping that GAE amount. So it's going to be a rolling process, and I think I need to talk with Monica, Sharon, Rick, and Vinny around the timing of everything, but ideally you'd be able to ask for it as you need it, as opposed to like having to project going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, and we know that none of you have actually seen the process that we are describing yet, and so that's really the purpose of the webinars. Is you know, at the webinars we'll be reviewing a template document that has links to different reports in Sugar that will help you request these funds. So there's a really easy step that you don't usually have to do, but what you would be doing is you'd be waitlisting your Race to the Top applicants that you'd like to support, and then you'd run the RTT waitlisted report, and that will show the QI dollars and coaching hours that you are requesting from the state, and then the state will be able to turn that around relatively quickly so that you can then update your budget and approve and send the MOUs for those sites. So you actually get to encumber the full amount. Once the general accounting encumbrance waiver is in place, you will be able to encumber the full amount at the time of the application approval, as opposed to waiting until the funds have actually been expended, which is a little bit more risky. So this is a really nice ability to kind of obligate the funds in advance of actually needing to use them. But that will be in place after the contract amendments are processed. Is that right, Emily?
I believe so. So I'll just double check. I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, and like Michelle said, Monica's been really heading up a lot of figuring this piece out. But yeah, that I was multitasking too, so I'm sorry, Sharon. I was trying to find that spreadsheet for you guys.
So I have one more question, and this might actually be a Sharon, Rick, or the other, the technical team side of it. I'm just curious then, I'm assuming you're going to address on these calls next week what happens for these programs who are moving from a 2 and are achieving these higher levels, and how we're dealing with those awards.
Right, so that would be considered a milestone award, and so we will have to have a report that indicates that a site has changed ratings, and so they can be awarded a milestone award for that change. What's tricky about that is sometimes the site might drop in a level and then regain their original level, and it's in a report that would look like they're increasing, but they really haven't increased. So one thing that we're working on behind the scenes is the creation of a ratings module that will keep the history of ratings more transparently as actual records, as opposed to just a field on the account record. And by doing that, we can run more accurate historical reports on changes in ratings, because as we all know, there have been adjustments here and there to ratings within Salesforce that then impact Sugar, and sometimes there are multiple changes until it finally settles on what the actual rating is. And it has something to do with the way that Salesforce processes that rating. So we're working to kind of unpeel that onion and figure out how to accurately store historical rating data and current rating data without reflecting those fluctuations. So kind of outsmart those fluctuations. So once we have that, then that report that you're speaking of, or the sort of automatic assignment of additional funds becomes much simpler. Until then, you can always, it's a transfer process. So as long as you have those funds approved by the state, you can just select the requisition action to award a milestone award and transfer additional funds.
So for now, they're using the requisition action.
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to capture that piece for now.
Yes.
I think one of those questions then, what's the right dollar figure that we should be using in the budget side of sugar for QI then?
Yeah, and one thing that there has been a lot of confusion because the Race to the Top grant in the funding stream module is recognized as only one funding stream as opposed to a funding stream for 15-16 and a funding stream for 16-17. And it was done that way because originally the thinking at the time was that it was going to be an amendment to the Race to the Top grant where those funds would literally roll over the year. But what ended up happening is this new general accounting encumbrance, which is really a new contractual type of issue. And so what we're trying to work with OEC to determine is the best way to split that. And so what we may end up doing is actually creating a new fiscal year 16-17 Race to the Top funding stream record and segregate that from the 15-16 records, at which point we can retroactively update the QI budgets and the coaching budget figures based on your actual activity as a council and then send to you all to review for accuracy. So, so it's kind of a lot of steps, but that is what we're starting to think through at this point so that we can make sure that those numbers are reflecting accurately based on actual activity.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay, good.
there were two questions. I put stars on them so some have been using full discretionary to do L1 outreach, you know, sort of back talking about the operating budget when that discussion, and then L2 additional coaching to get them to L3 to 5.
Right.
So I want to make sure that that was addressed.
Yeah, so Tina, I think that's absolutely what the intention was, is that you use your operating budget, i.e. the discretionary portion of the operating budget to support additional outreach efforts or additional coaching services as needed, and as you have funds for.
Did that answer your question, Tina? Or your statement? Maybe. Yes, she thinks so. Okay, and then there was another one that how does this impact programs that we already have MOUs with but will not actually spend the funds prior to October 31st? Well, my understanding of the process, and I may be wrong because I'm still learning it, is that the information that they sent to the state on September 7th is how much money that they'll have in the pot for this.
Yes, for this period.
Are they still going to go through the process for approving all those? Any
new applications, yeah.
So new applications, yes. The existing ones. So the existing ones will go through the same process. Maybe we should.
Okay. It does not impact existing MOUs. So you have MOUs that were for the 15-16 time period. You had received some instruction where if you had any providers who are carrying over funds into 16-17 that they needed an MOU amendment. You know that many of those MOU amendments have been processed, and so those are looking good. And so you would not need any new MOU with anyone who already has an MOU and an MOU amendment. For the 16-17 funding stream year, that there already was a new MOU for the 16-17 year, and that has been what has been used. So you are all set. You don't need to worry about any changes to the MOU.
Well, but that's the MOUs. I'm wondering about the spending for what, because she's asking for MOUs that are already out there, both sets of MOUs. The 15-16 that are left over, as well as the 16-17.
Yeah, Deb, do you want to jump on with voice?
Yeah, we're trying to interpret your.
Well, and so here's my question, and this is me sitting here. It's already September, so if you've executed executed MOUs in 15-16. I'm trying to understand why they wouldn't be included in your estimate for the spend down by October 31st, because we really need to be careful around, this is Emily, around making sure that if people are going to be, have the expectation of accessing the dollars, that they are accessing it, right, in a timely fashion. So we're almost we're over 60 days out from the beginning of the state fiscal year. So I need a little better understanding of the hesitation around spend down, or is it because there's certain conferences in the spring, or, you know, what's the delay?
Yeah, I could jump in. This is Sharon. So certainly there can be some really legitimate reasons why providers have not expended funds. One would be that they're saving those funds or coaching hours in preparation for a rating that's coming a little later in the year. Another could be, like you were saying, they're saving for college coursework that's occurring later in the year. Or the other piece could be that coaching capacity, you know, from a scheduling perspective, that the coaches just can't get out there until a little bit later in the year. So there are some really good reasons. There are some not so good reasons. I know, like, for example, in Denver, we have a couple sites who applied a long time ago, and they're just not being responsive to outreach to get the dollars spent in a good, thoughtful way. And so, you know, that's part of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's figuring out with those sites that aren't being responsive, at what point, you know, I think we've talked about at what point is it appropriate for you, for a council to say last chance, or it's going into the big pot, right?
Right. And so just so that all the councils know, you have the ability on your own Race to the Top funding stream to set the expiration date for the requisitions, the default expiration date. So you could set that more aggressively, and what that does is it stamps in as new requisitions are created. So you could stagger those expiration dates.
And that actually,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, Rick,
I've
you want to
noticed.
go ahead?
Yeah. You want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I've noticed that on a lot of requisitions for Race to the Top, the expiration date is set as September 30th, 2016. So that's going to be coming into effect. So do you want me to go ahead and show how to change where that is? Or
I think that might be much right now.
Okay. No, that's fine. So, but, you know, I do know that there'll be a lot of that September 30th is going to be down a lot of them because of what's in.
Yeah, and I think what's important to know about the expiration date for requisitions is that it's purely to remove the requisition from ECConnect for providers. As the council, after your expiration date passes, you still have the ability to work with that requisition. So if you have someone and they have a good reason to have missed the expiration date, you can still help them process the orders through ECConnect. And you also have complete ability to update that expiration date as needed so that it matches what you're communicating to providers, because just because it says 9:30 in sugar doesn't mean that that's what the providers think is their expiration date. So you need to communicate with the providers when your expiration date is and make sure that sugar matches that. And Emily, from your perspective, does OEC want to have certain expiration dates for certain requisitions, or do you not want to get in the weeds on that? What are your thoughts? Maybe.
On the call on Monday, Monica, I'd asked that question to Monica, and that actually we will be covering that.
Okay, yeah. Great. So it sounds like we will have more information on expiration dates on the calls next
Okay, this is Sherry. Can I ask a question now?
Hey, Sherry.
Okay. So one of the other problems that I was running into was because of the requirement to put the budget amounts into sugar under the budget pieces for RTT, it's taken me quite a while and a lot of conversations to figure out exactly what funds I had left from the first agreement. So this is before you know, this new process, but I do not have the accurate numbers put into sugar under the budget sections, and so it's telling me now that I'm extended, and I can't send MOUs. So even the little bit of money I said we could spend by October 31st, giving that information to Emily at OEC, I cannot send those MOUs. So should I be, and it sounds like there's going to be some changes there.
Thank you for bringing that up, Gary. I think everyone is in that position, so including Denver Council. So like we did not have UI dollars and coaching funds allocated in this year yet, as we only had our program operating budget. No one had accurate numbers because no one had the actual UI dollars. There's some feedback, I think. So now that we've sent these numbers to the Office of Early Childhood, they can approve or give us a different number, and then we can actually put those numbers into the Race to the Top funding stream so that you can send MOUs. But the whole idea is that you really shouldn't have been sending MOUs or spending Race to the Top funds or coaching on Race to the Top unless you are paying for it out of your program operating budget since July 1st, because we really didn't have the funds allocated at that time.
Actually, Sharon, that's not exactly true. I received other guidance from the state. So for some, maybe for you, but that's not the guidance that we received.
So if you had a different arrangement that was approved by the state, then maybe you would have known what your numbers were. But I know that from our perspective, we didn't have those funds designated to us yet in our contract.
Right. But if they had leftover funds?
Leftover funds, the contract ended.
Oh.
So there were no leftover funds.
However, guidance from the state said those were well over. That was actually recorded at an ECCLA meeting, and that was actually verified from the state by several different people. So there is much confusion on understanding on that.
Yes, I agree. I don't know if anyone from the state wants to chime in. I think the words rollover have been used, but from a contracting perspective, those funds were not in our contracts unless we budgeted them in our Race to the Top program operating budget.
Absolutely. They were not in the contract because we not received that contract. However, the guidance and the correspondence with those are rolled over funds, guidance on how to use those and continue to spend in July were given. Not in a contract, but verbally in several different manners as well as related in ECCLA meeting.
Right. So, Jackie, that's part of why we're asking for how much you've spent in July and August.
Correct.
So that we can be sure that those funds are part of that new line. So
absolutely, Emily, and Michelle gave us great guidance, bless her heart. She was on the phone 2 days and 4 hours and so forth to, as she said, that things have changed and so forth, and going through that process. And it was wonderful in providing the new information now, but I just wanted Sharon to know, she said that was not, that that's not true. At least that's not the correspondence we had. I understand from a contract perspective, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for chiming in with that. You know, I think we generally try and take a conservative route and have things in writing in the contract, but certainly there's nothing indicating that you couldn't have put those funds into your program operating budget, which is part of your contract. So I think each of us kind of handled this a little bit differently for July through August, and now I think that one of the goals is to kind of get us all handling it the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. understanding how we're trying to get that going, but I just wanted to clarify that rolling it over into RTTO, that was not allowed. That was something we did request. That was not allowed. Again, now maybe you were allowed or somebody else was allowed that. We were not allowed that, but we were given different guidance.
My question is, in my mind, we have a top by moving in order to kind of look at meeting that deadline of October 31st, but I don't even know how to go about that if I can't even send an MOU. So should I go ahead and send it just under our own accounting system and then enter it later when it's worked out, or how do we move forward in the next 4 weeks?
So Sherry, if you
will
have
it be resolved soon?
Figure from the state, you can just update the budget figure in Sugar, and then you will be able to send the MOUs.
Send the MOU, okay, with that amount that we agreed on. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Yep. So I do think that there has been a lot of confusion and different information being shared in different venues, and so it sounds like one of our major goals is through the webinars next week to really go into the detail of how the process will work moving forward and how we're all going to catch up that we have the right budget figures in Sugar and are able to send MOUs as intended. So. Well, are there any other questions or comments around Race to the Top, or do we want to move on to the next agenda item?
Sounds like that there's no additional questions. So one of the questions that actually came up before the call is that insufficient resources. Is that all right if I go on to that question for everybody? You can just put in yes or no, or say I still have another question. So put if a few people would either chime in, sure, Sandra said yes, Teresa, thank you, Amy. Hera, thanks. Okay. I will move on, Karina. Okay, so I have created a section. The question is insufficient resources. So sometimes you're getting an email that after you send an MOU that says there's insufficient resources. So I have created 2 articles, and I want to show you where these are because I'm adding them to the forum so you guys can ask additional questions, and they're under the forums under FAQ. Oh, okay. I've been told I'm in the wrong place, so you guys can.
You got to go to the actual portal.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, sorry. Good to have Sharon here. Okay, so I'm going to forums, and then scrolling down to the bottom. Actually, I'm not used to this one as much. Okay. Let me try again. We'll go down. Oh, there it is. Okay, so on my screen it's a little different. So there's a section sort of about 2/3 of the way down called FAQ, and you go into there. there is a article. What does it mean when it says insufficient resources to approve? So that's the first one. The first thing that you can do before you send an MOU is look at your requisitions. Add more comments in here, but it's really important before you send MOUs to look at the requisitions attached to that application to see if they're correct, if the dollar amount is correct, if the coaching hours are correct. And one of the big things that comes up right now is, for example, the default is internal coaching hours, and a lot of you are doing external coaching hours. And that's easy to correct, and I'll show you how to do that at the end of this. Okay, so generally what that insufficient resources to approve means that you have requisitions that hit the limit of either coaching or QI dollars. And so you go to your funding stream and you can see what dollars that you have reserved for participants and how many dollars are remaining to be assigned, and a roll-up of the provider QI dollars. In this case, you can see that the roll-up of all the requisitions is $50,000, and then there's only $28,000 left to be assigned, so you're over. Does that make sense? Sharon, do you want to add anything?
Well, I think what we need to do is host a webinar that is specific to completing these budgets, because even on the screenshot you can see the other direct QI budget, the new field right above the highlighted circle is blank.
Oh, okay.
That needs to be filled in.
Okay.
This is just a screenshot. Yeah. But so what you want to do is you want to put in your total approved budget that is specifically designated for quality improvement dollars as it relates to the application process and new requisitions. You also need to put in a similar figure but for coaching. And so if you don't have any dollars in this budget, then as an internal control, Sugar is going to prevent you from sending an MOU for which you do not have a designated budget. This was done at the request of councils and OEC. When we first rolled out Sugar a year and a half ago, there was a lot of concern that Sugar was going to somehow over-obligate a council because it's going to create the requisitions and the council is just going to go ahead and approve them and send the MOU. And so an internal control was put in place so that the council has the complete control to be able to update their budget figures based on an approved budget, so that you can accurately reflect how much money and coaching hours you have available for sites going through the application process. So it's again, kind of an internal control that gives you the steering wheel to make sure that you're not accidentally over assigning the dollars or the coaching hours to child care sites. But the problem, as Sherry indicated, was that for Race the Top in particular, we were all very unclear what our approved budget for Race the Top QI dollars and coaching hours was. And so many of us didn't really put in a number, and so we couldn't send MOUs. And some of us did put in a number, but it was an estimate based on last year's funding, which contractually was not actually the case, even though we were getting guidance that we could roll things over and that there was no problem with that. So we were kind of in a funny limbo space. But now that you've sent in your budget figures to the state, and if they've approved those, then you can update the module, the funding stream module, with those numbers. However, if you hold off on doing that, what we're trying to do is, in preparation for the Monday webinar, we're actually hoping to, for example, to address Lisa's question, we are actually hoping to use the data in Sugar that reflects actual spending and actual coaching activities, and use that to update the budget amounts so that all the budgets are basically level set. So we've got, you know, let's say you spent $100,000 on QI dollars and you performed 1,000 coaching hours. Actually, in Sugar records, in the QI spending and in the coaching records, we can update the funding stream to reflect that, so that then any new approved funding that you have, for example, from July 1 through October 31, you can just add that, and then you know that you've got the right number in the system. So we're working on trying to reverse engineer that a little bit, so that we all have a cleaner starting point to really address this new contract amendment that will be coming.
Well, and I want to apologize to everybody. I was trying to get this article done right before the call, and I didn't have a chance to proof it. So I am going to, you know, put this insufficient resources back to the drawing board. So I have 2 articles that are good for you. So I really feel bad, you know, because I really was trying to, you know, trying to get everything done before the call and trying to do these changes. So I do apologize. I know I had promised to some of you that I would do the insufficient resources.
Well, I think we can all give 3 cheers to Rick, because he's really trying hard to support all of the questions that are coming in, and it is no easy feat. So thank you, Rick, for everything that you're doing. Okay, so we could try. You know, I think maybe what we can do is schedule the following Friday. Next week is ECCLA Day. Why don't we have the following Friday, rather than a typical Sugar support call, why don't we actually queue that up as a training on the budget module? Yeah. And kind of additional follow-up questions around Race to the Top. So we'll get an agenda sent out today, so that if you have staff at your council who would be more appropriate to attend next Friday, then you can invite them, and we'll invite everyone. You mean a week from Friday? Or? A week from Friday, yeah.
Oh, well, I meant 2 weeks from today, right? Oh, okay.
After ECCLA Day.
After state, okay.
And then that way we can record it and have that available as part of an article. We do have support articles on this, but I think, you know, in particular with Race to the Top, it's just a little tricky. So why don't we plan on doing that? Does that sound like a good plan to everyone? We got a 3 cheers for you, Rick. Oh. All right, everyone's saying yes. Okay, great.
The agenda for, that's the 23rd?
Yes, that is the 23rd. And so just as a general question, are people feeling like the funding stream module is working for them for the other funding streams like school readiness and CCAP and ITQA? Feeling like that's also not super clear? And you can just use your voice and say, no, it's not clear, or yes, it is. You don't want to be recorded. Not super clear.
Not super clear?
Okay, great. So you know what, we can address that on the call, and let's walk through some examples, and maybe we'll identify if you're a council that is interested in kind of helping us demonstrate the budgets, let us know, because sometimes I think it's a lot easier if you use real examples. If no one volunteers, we're happy to use the Denver Council budget. So, okay. Well, is there anything else that anyone would like to cover that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about?
There are areas that we requested training for the November training. Yeah, we did send out a survey for the training, and it actually is still open. And so, yeah, I do appreciate all the responses. We got 27 responses in the first hour, so it was incredible. Thank you all.
Sounds like people are hungry for training.
Yeah.
So, awesome. How's everything else going? Are people supporting a lot of programs, doing a lot of coaching? Anybody want to little program highlights in the last 4 minutes? And on a positive note.
You guys, this is Sandy. I have a real quick question, and I know that you've covered it, Rick. I just have forgotten how to deal with it. When I end up going into requisitions, or I end up going, let's say I go into spending, and I would like to just look at my pending or the ones that need to be approved. Sometimes I get bogged down with all the things that are already have already been handled and taken care of. They're at the beginning, and so then I have to muddle all the way down to the bottom to try to get to those. And I know there's an easy way for me to filter out the things I don't care about and then just look at the things I do care about. Could you just show me one more time how to do that?
Why don't you do that on spending?
Okay, so I'm in sugar. I'm going to spending. So I clicked on the spending tab, and again, if you don't have it, you can click this more and choose spending. So what is your abbreviation for your team?
DCECC.
Okay, and I already have a filter in there, but I can remove it. So there's lots.
Why don't we show
You can see all those reconciled.
You see these little plus and minuses, so that allows you to remove this filter or add a new filter. So let's remove this one, and then let's add a new one. That is the status.
Okay.
And remember that you don't have to filter by team because you're only going to see your team.
Right.
So if you go in and filter by status and then select the status, you want to see anything that's ready for you to approve. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay, so we want to say ready for pre-approval.
Right.
And so then what's really great is if you want to save this filter, let's do a different one that has
we can add one.
I think I've done them all. But
maybe you're on the you maybe
I'm going to do the minus.
I think I've approved them all up to this date. That's what's going on. But what I was trying to get at, Sharon, is really I want to reconcile, cancel, blah, blah, things that I don't really need to be looking at any longer.
You don't want to get rid of them because
I don't want to get rid of them. Yeah.
Yeah, but she can, let me show you, because we can also do is not. So if what I'm doing is I'm going to, again, select on status.
Okay.
And so the choice is not.
Okay.
You could do is any or is not. And in your case, it sounds like is not might be better.
Okay.
So what I chose is not any of. And then I'm going to scroll down because we can see a lot of reconciled over here.
Right.
So I'm going to scroll down to.
And just as a tip, if you start typing reconcile, it will just do it for you. So you don't have to scroll down and get confused.
Yeah, I already see, and it. Okay, and so now after it loads, so you can see all those that don't have reconciled, and we can take out. I'm going to type CA.
Nice. Okay, that's what I want to do.
And then what's even better is if you see this enter new filter name. See that?
Oh yes.
You can actually save this filter. So let's call it. Nope, down.
Right here.
And let's call it status. All statuses except reconciled and canceled, or whatever you want to call it.
Nice.
And you hit save.
So all the way over here. My mouse, because well,
you can hit save, and then you can. Then that is so see how it added it right here. So you know you're on this filter. So if you want to get rid that filter, you press the little X. And then if you want to add that filter back, then you come back to the filter and you just go select it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, great.
So
that helps me a lot.
Good. It's like its own little reporting module that's actually a lot easier to use. The other thing is you can show and hide columns through the little 3 dots. So you can pick the columns you want to show or hide. And if there's a field that you just wish was available in this view, it is likely that we can add it here. But we just want to be careful not to add too many fields. So just let us know if there's a field that you really wished you had in that.
Yeah, because I was taking way too long going through, you know, keep going to the bottom of my pages, and I knew there was a much easier way to deal with it.
Good.
Thank you.
So filter, and if you've already saved it, it's on the bottom of, you know, it's on the filter menu. So
Perfect.
down here, there you go.
And do you have?
Nicole has a really good tip. So Nicole Malone is saying, I do a filter search for %17 to look at only this year's spending request. So that's another really good. Great job, Nicole. All right.
Anything else? Well, we're past our time. So thank you all for being on the call and supporting ECCLA and everybody else that's on the call. Thank you for supporting each other as well as us.
And a big thank you and shout out to OEC, you know, Emily and Michelle. Thank you for being on the call. We know that Monica has been really heading this up, so we appreciate you being here in her absence. So thank you.
Oh, we're delighted to, and we're doing our best to make sure we all have the same knowledge. So thank you guys for working with us.
Thanks so much, Emily. Mm-hmm.